to our first panel of the day. The theme of the panel is the politics of Pan-Africanism. We have 4 speakers for this panel, and we will introduce each presenter before they speak, because if I introduce everyone now, by the time we get to the 4th person, you'll forget important details. So, each speaker will have 15 minutes to present. To help you with your timing, I'll have a buzzer. So if there's 5 minutes left, I'll do 1 ring. If there's 1 minute left, I'll do 2 rings. And if there's no time left, I'll do 3 rings. And then after that, we'll figure out what to do. But our first presenter is, in fact, one of the brains behind this event, Dr. Ebede Ndi, who is a researcher, practitioner, and educator in African-centered psychology. His work, rooted in ancestral traditions and decolonial approaches, explores Pan-Africanism as a praxis of collective healing and mental emancipation in Africa and throughout the diasporas. He is the author of the recent book, The Psychology of Pan-Africanism, Between Illusion and Liberation, published with Springer Nature this year, 2026. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Ebede, and I'll set the PowerPoint.
Microphone works? You can hear me? Yes. Slide. So if there's one thing to remember throughout my presentation today, it's that a people without a memory is a people without a future. That's the only thing we need to remember. My whole presentation. Next one. So Pan-Africanism has a really broad definition, but I chose to just summarize it as a struggle for the reclamation of African sovereignty, both on the continent and in the diaspora. I can explain to you the flat nature, maybe to the Q&A. Next slide. So, it is born of a shared struggle of resistance among Africans and people of African descent. It started in the Caribbean, then moved to the US, then to Europe, and Africa actually was the last continent to be aware of the Pan-African movement. Next. So Africa then is the matrix organizing the whole Pan-African movement. But Africa needs to fix a paradox. The paradox is you can see potential versus reality. For example, Africa has about 30% of world minerals, but only 2 to 3% of global GDP. About 19 to 20% of world population, with 2 to 3% of world trade. Over 60% of Africans are young, under 25 years old. Yet, Africa is crushed by crippling foreign aid, by the trillions. Why doesn't this add up? Next slide. So it is not accidental, it is actually produced, it's constructed. And 2 forces shape that reality, that paradox. External pressure, internal response. Next. So, Woodson said in 1933, that if you can control a way a person thinks, you do not have to worry about their action. So, because narratives justify systems and systems shape outcomes, Europeans decided to create a narrative to make Africans believe those narratives. Among those were, for example, the German philosopher Hegel, who said that Africa has no history. Therefore, it's okay to exploit Africa, it's okay to colonize Africa, it's okay to civilize Africa. Former President Nicolas Sarkozy said, Africa has not yet entered history, meaning we are not even at the level of animal yet. We are even beneath the level of animals, according to the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy. And current French President Macron said, ungratefulness is a non-communicable disease in humans. saying Africans are not grateful because they are not thanking France enough for what France has done to Africa. Next slide. During the Q&A, I will debunk this. This is sorry. So you can understand that Africa is not poor. Africa is actually impoverished because there is an end game that is being produced from the outside, as the professor will explain to us. Play the video, please. The sound.
Africa, where it is also impoverished. It's absolutely right. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap. Okay, so that's the message. It doesn't mean to say that there's nothing Africans can do. Of course there is. Okay, because if Africa does do something different, I assure you, living standards of all those in Europe and North America and Asia is going to fall. Okay? And that is a big price to pay. I assure you that the West is not going to allow that without a big fight.
So, this is what we're up against. But then how do we Africans respond to this, since the plan is to keep Africa impoverished? Next slide.
Okay, we do everything.
So, it's easy to always blame others that other people are keeping us poor. What do we as Africans do to respond to this? We have to understand African mentality, thinking mode, so you understand what's going on. Africans in general have a magic-driven mentality where we think that everything can happen just by waving a magic wand. To understand this, let's go back briefly to history. When the Europeans came to Africa, they used a three-end strategy. First, they sent the merchant. Merchant came into Africa to trade. They were selling things, we were buying. Our ancestors were selling things, Europeans were buying. The real goal behind the merchants was to go into Africa and study Africans' behavior, African thinking modality, African religion, belief system, and all of that. They realized that Africans, our ancestors, have a religious mindset. We believe in God, we have the gods, we have traditions and all that. They returned and reported, and then they sent the second end, the missionary. The missionary came into Africa with the Bible. And what they did, they asked our ancestors to get rid of all of their belief systems, to get rid of all of their totems, get rid of all of their names, their language, everything that made their identity, and embrace Western education, embrace Western religion in the form of Christianity. That also happened centuries earlier with Islam. So then they were now convinced that they had control our minds. And if you remember, Jomo Kenyatta, I think was the first president of Kenya, said, when the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible and the Africans had the land. Then we close our eyes to pray, and when we open our eyes, the missionaries had the land, our lands, and we have their Bible. So that's why we got stuck in the second end. Our minds were not controlled. And then we send the third end, military. And once you control the mind, the military's easy job to just do what they did. Slavery and colonization. Then we have a tribe-driven mentality. Many of you can understand that a lot of our leaders are not appointing people based on meritocracy. They appoint people based on who is from my clan, who is from my tribe, who speaks my language. And that keeps different tribes divided, and we neutralize each other, and Africans cannot move on. When different tribes control power, control money, and then you have all the civil wars that keep destroying Africa for the control of those resources. So, and then we have a colonial-driven mentality where we always blame. It's always the fault of colonization, always the fault of the others, right? If, for example, Taiwan, Japan colonized Taiwan for 50 years, 50. So if Taiwan was crying every day, now Japan's fault, Taiwan will not develop. They roll up their sleeves and develop their countries. So it's not okay to always blame the others. Another thing is we imitate. We want to imitate the former colonialists. We want to dress like them, speak well like them, memorize all their theories, and if we can regurgitate it very well, we get their degrees, we get awards, and then they define us as being intelligent. So what we need to do, from the market-driven mindset, we need to develop agency. Go back, reconnect with our ancestral values, our ancestral way of doing, our identity. Division, we need solidarity as liberation. And then for colonial-driven, we need self-definition. Next slide, please. So what I'm offering is a path that will follow 5 axes. So I want to make sure that you understand that what I call illusion and liberation. Illusion doesn't mean bad, liberation doesn't mean good. It means illusion and liberation are different. What I call illusion are the values that were imposed on us, the values that came from the West, education and all of this. They're not all bad, but they were imposed on us, substituting, replacing our core values. What I call liberation is to go back and reconnect with our ancestral ways of doing. We can update that in the 21st century, but we need to reclaim our identity as our ancestors used to have, right? So, African American author Kobe Campbell calls it what I call illusion, called cultural misorientation. And what I call liberation, he calls it cultural reorientation, or African self-extension orientation, or African self-consciousness. So, next slide. So, these are the 5 axes that can help us understand the path, how we can move from illusion to liberation. First, the ontology of the self. How do we understand the self? The self, I, you, how do we understand that from an African perspective? Illusion, what they taught us from foreign education was that the self is an individual, individualism. It's me, it's I am isolated, I am atomic. For us, it was more collectivism, interbeing, right? So the self is separate. Me first, I, me. From Africa is us first, we, us. Ubuntu, I am because you are. And then those values that were important, competitive. I mean, I need to do better than you. I need to compete against you. I need to do what you're doing better than you do, even if I can put you down. But ancient African ways was interdependence. How my weaknesses, how my strength can complement your weaknesses, and how your strength can complement my weaknesses. So that is how we are used to understand the self. But today we're not understanding the self. Epistemology of understanding. Episteme from Greek means knowledge. Logic means study, science. So it's just how do we know? What was brought to us? The West taught us, for example, if there are some students in the room, that when you do research, you must be objective, right? You be objective. You must be detached from the subject of your study. You must observe them, a little bit like God is up there observing His creature. And then the result that you have become universal truths, universal claims, because we're neutral enough. But the way we did it, our ancestor, was more, research was more relational, contextual, immersed. The researcher is part of the community that is researching, right? You must be situated, you must engage the people you're doing research with. So, and the truths that come from your research are applicable to the community that you study. For example, in Asia, people take shower in the evening to clean their body from the sweat of the day, relax their muscles so they can sleep well. In the West, people take shower in the morning so they can face the day fresh. So those are 2 truths that are true in their own context. Next one. Ethics of relation, consent versus covenant. You will notice one thing. If you ask Africans to sign consent form, they will be very reluctant. They might not even do it. Why? What was imposed was researcher is required from a Western perspective to sign a consent form to protect themselves and protect the school, right? And then when they do the research from a detached place, the result of their research is usually published to promote their own career or the prestige of their institutions. And that stays there. But the way our ancestors used to do, it was covenant. Our ancestors in Africa understood that if you were studying something, you need to build trust first, as opposed to just show me a paper to sign. You need to build trust first. You need to immerse in the community that you're studying. You need to accept their ways of doing, accept their belief system, and that you are also accepted by them. And then when the trust is built, then the research now can operate not only on the factual level, but even on the spiritual level. So, and then when you have the results, you can still publish your result to advance your career and the prestige of the school. But it doesn't stop there. You must bring that back to uplift the community that you study. How many of you, when you finish your study, go back to those communities and try to make them benefit from the result of your study? But that was how our ancestors used to do. So the government, the political space, what was brought to us from the West and other outside of Africa was that leadership is about authority, it's about representation, it's about control, power. The way our ancestors used to do it, a leader was a steward. He was in service of the community, in service of the people that he or she was leading. So the leader was accountable and custodian of values of the community. So we have a different understanding in terms of leadership. So unless we go back to our ancestral ways, we'll still be lost. So we're going to move to the next one, the fifth path. Now, this is a big one. Paul Freire, a Brazilian academic, developed a concept called banking model. When we started, the way Western education was presented to us, there is a body of knowledge that we bring into our schools. We need to ingurgitate them, read them, memorize all of them, like you put your money in the bank. So memorize as much as you can, and then like passive, uncritically. Even if though the things that we say is against us, misrepresenting us, we need to remember that. And then what we do is we can now repeat it, right? But the way our ancestors were doing, it was more like active dialogue, problem posing. Our way our ancestors were dealing with that, community has problem that we need to pause, discuss, interact, and then the result, the fixing of the problem now should transform the community. Which is not the same. Next slide. And you can see a bird's eye view. Illusion and liberation. You can see all the things that were brought into us, right? Individualism, objectivity, and all that. And you can see the things that we disconnected from. Liberation on the other side, right? So epistemology of separation, that according to us, everybody for themselves, and epistemology of relation, everybody support each other, right? So we are in the middle. Many of us are stuck in the middle, the tension point. Some of us Africans have both feet in the illusion, some of us have both feet in liberation. But many of us are still one foot on the liberation, on the illusion, and the other on the liberation, and we stop there in the middle. What we need to do, we need to use Ubuntu, which is the South African philosophy, I am because you are. We need to use Maat, who is the ancient African goddess of justice, truth, and balance, and we need to use Mafa, who is the Western African concept of go back into the past, fix what was broken, retrieve what was lost, bring it into the present so that it can guide the future. Those are the philosophies that we have. If we reconnect with them, then we will make the move easily towards liberation. And that liberation now leads to transformation. And transformation happens across 5 fields: psychology, governance, education, knowledge, and identity. Next one. Next slide. I'm in Taiwan, that's not fine, right? Yes. So now that I've diagnosed the problem, how do we design the solution? Next. Pan-African psychology is a new field. Pan-Africanism is old field, but Pan-African psychology is a new field. We don't have enough body of literature yet. We don't have enough well-structured theories and methods yet. What I do in my book, I am offering a path forward for the new field of Pan-African psychology. That field should rest on 3 foundations. Epistemic sovereignty, we must own our knowledge. Psychological empowerment, we must be strict in our minds. And spiritual continuity, we must reconnect to our indigenous ways of doing things. Once we've done that, we have solid foundation. Now we have pillars. Theory on the left. The theories that we study, we use in the new field, must be decolonial, cultural, political, spiritual. And then methodology should be African methodology, indigenous inquiry, participatory action research, and critical pedagogy, and ritual-based methods. As you can see outlined on the slide. So next one. During Q&A, I can explain this model more because I've run out of time, but this is the model how to heal from personal, historical, and transgenerational traumas. And I'll give some specific ways how to navigate that if we have time to do Q&A. Next one. So this is my book that was actually released yesterday. Published by Marcus, right? So all of the ideas that I'm talking about, you can find this in this book, and then because you're very generous, you can even have 20%, you can just use that code there. So the bottom line is what? Is that the true liberation starts with investing in research and education. Many of our African countries invest less than 15% on education and less than 1% on research. By comparison, we don't have time, but if you click on this link on the web, you will find it is the website of the President of Taiwan. You look at the organization of the presidency. On the top, you have the office of the president. Down, you have the deputy president. Right down, on the left, Academia Sinica. On the right, Academia Sinica. And then down, you have other services of Taiwan. That is what the smart country is planning its future. What is Academia Sinica doing? It was created in Nanjing, in China, in 1947, relocated in Taiwan in 1957. It is a memory of the history of Taiwan. It is keeping Taiwan history. Academia Sinica. So everything that has to do with Taiwan, you find that in Academia Sinica. Academia Sinica is the research excellence of Taiwan and policy advisor. Academia Sinica does research and advise the president how to guide the country. So it's a little bit like a research think tank. We don't really have that in many of African countries that are serious, that's really thinking about research and innovation. Next one. That's the end. So, Pan-African psychology is not a critique of the West, if you have that feeling. It is a recovery of African ways of being, knowing, and governing. Pan-Africanism must move from critique of illusion to construction of liberation. It goes through 3 related and necessary stages. Memory, like I told you, Academia Sinica of Taiwan. Memory, who we are. Solidarity, what we are. Story, how we write our own history. Next. Thank you.